The wind howled through the pines like a wounded animal, carrying with it the promise of another brutal Montana winter. Elias Ward stood at the window of his cabin, watching the first heavy flakes of snow drift down from a sky the color of old pewter. His coffee had gone cold in his hands, but he didn't notice. These days, he rarely noticed much of anything. 35 years on this earth. And what did he have to show for it? A cabin built with his own 2 hands. True enough. A rifle that never missed. Knowledge of every game trail within 20 miles. But no warm body beside him at night. No children's laughter to fill the empty spaces. No woman's gentle touch to remind him he was still human. The scar tissue on the left side of his face pulled tight in the cold. 5 years now since the mine collapse at Copper Creek. 5 years since the tons of rock came down, trapping him and 12 other men in the darkness. He'd been one of 3 to crawl out alive, but he'd left more than just friends in that hellhole. He'd left his future there too. Elias traced the ruined landscape of his face with one finger. The flesh was puckered and twisted from temple to jaw, his left eye clouded and useless. Sarah Mae Henderson had taken one look at him when he'd finally made it back to town and turned away, her pretty face pale with horror. She'd married the bank clerk 2 months later. Wouldn't even meet his eyes at the general store. That's when he'd packed up what little he owned and headed for the mountains. Better to be alone by choice than to watch folks cross the street to avoid him. Better to wake to the sound of wind in the trees than to the whispers behind cupped hands. He turned from the window and surveyed his domain. One room, sturdy and warm. A stone fireplace he'd built himself, rock by rock. A bed with a quilt his mother had made before the consumption took her. A table, 2 chairs. Why he'd built 2. He couldn't say hope, maybe, or habit. His pantry was well stocked with smoked venison, dried beans, flour, coffee. Come spring, he'd go down to Millfield for supplies. Endure the stairs and silence long enough to trade his furs for necessities. The cabin creaked under the weight of the wind. Outside, the snow was falling heavier now, building little pyramids on the windowsills. Soon the pass would be blocked entirely. No one would make it up the mountain until the spring thaw. Just him and the wolves and the silence. Elias moved to the fireplace, added another log to the flames. The wood caught with a shower of sparks, and for a moment the room felt almost alive. He'd gotten good at lying to himself over the years, told himself this was what he wanted. Peace, solitude, no complications. But on nights like this, when the snow piled high and the wind sang its lonely song, the truth crept in through the cracks. He was 35 years old and had never held a woman in his arms, never heard a child call him Papa, never known what it was to matter to someone. The accident hadn't just taken his face, it had taken his courage too. He pulled the rocking chair closer to the fire, settled in with his rifle across his knees. Habit, mostly. Nothing ever came up here except the occasional wolf or mountain cat, and they'd learned to give his cabin a wide berth. The rifle was more companion than weapon these days, something solid to hold when the emptiness pressed too close. The coffee pot sat on the hearth, keeping warm. He poured himself another cup, black as midnight and twice as bitter, just the way he'd learned to like it. When you lived alone, there was no one to complain about your habits, no one to suggest a little sugar might improve things, no one to share the quiet moments when the fire burned low and the night stretched endless. Thunder rumbled overhead, unusual for a snowstorm. The old-timers in town would call it a bad omen, snow and thunder together. But Elias had stopped believing in omens the day that mountain fell on him. Now he believed in what he could see and touch, the solid walls of his cabin, the weight of his rifle, the burn of cheap whiskey on cold nights. He must have dozed, because the sound that woke him came from a dream of the mine. Hammering, desperate, frantic hammering, someone trying to dig their way out of the dark. His heart pounded as he jerked upright, the rifle clattering to the floor. But he wasn't in the mine. He was in his cabin. The fire burned down to embers, the storm raging outside, and someone was pounding on his door. Elias froze. No one came up here, No one even knew exactly where his cabin was except for Jim Sullivan at the trading post. And Jim knew better than to send anyone his way. The pounding came again, weaker this time. Not the confident knock of a man, but something desperate, frightened. He retrieved his rifle, checked the load. Could be a trap. Outlaws sometimes used women or children as bait. Get a man to open his door, then rush him. But what outlaw would be out in this storm? And how would they have found him? Moving to the door, he called out, "Who's there? State your business!" No answer. Just another weak knock. Then a sound that made his blood run cold. A woman's moan of pain. Every instinct told him to bar the door. Let the storm take care of whatever trouble had found its way to his threshold. He'd hidden away to avoid complications. And a woman at his door in a blizzard was nothing but complications. But his mother had raised him better than that. And even 5 years of solitude hadn't completely killed the man she'd tried to make him. He lifted the heavy bar, opened the door a crack. The wind tried to tear it from his hands, snow swirling in like a cloud of frozen bees. And there, collapsed on his doorstep, was a woman, young, from what he could see, her dress soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her head, and her belly, good Lord, her belly was swollen with child. "Please," she gasped, looking up at him with eyes glazed with pain and cold. "My baby is coming now. Have me—" Then she fainted dead away, falling forward into the snow. Elias stood frozen for a heartbeat, rifle in his hands, staring down at the unconscious woman. This was what he'd feared, what he'd run to the mountains to avoid. The messy, painful, complicated business of caring for another human being. But he couldn't leave her there. Whatever else the mine had taken from him, it hadn't taken his basic decency. He set the rifle aside, bent to gather her in his arms. She weighed next to nothing despite her condition. Bird bones and desperation. Her skin was cold as creek water, her lips tinged blue. How long had she been out in the storm? How had she even found his cabin? Questions for later. He carried her inside, kicked the door shut behind them. The warmth of the cabin seemed to revive her slightly. She moaned and stirred in his arms. He laid her on his bed, pulled off her sodden coat. Her dress beneath was wool, good quality but worn thin in places. A wedding ring glinted on her left hand. Elias built up the fire until it roared, filled the kettle with snow to melt for hot water. His hands shook as he worked. A pregnant woman. Here, and from the way she'd been breathing, from the pain in her voice, her time was close. He knew how to birth calves and foals, had helped with plenty of animal deliveries. But a human child? A woman in labor? She stirred on the bed, eyes fluttering open. Brown eyes, he noticed, deep brown like good coffee, though clouded now with pain. "Where—" she began, then gasped as another pain took her. Her hands went to her belly, face contorting. "You're safe," he said, though he wasn't sure that was true. "You're in my cabin. I'm going to help you." She focused on him then, and he waited for the familiar flinch, the moment when she saw his ruined face and recoiled, but her eyes stayed steady on his. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, stronger, "My baby, the baby's coming." The next hours would test every ounce of strength Elias Ward had left, but for now, in this moment, he simply nodded and set about doing what needed to be done. The storm raged outside, sealing them in together, the damaged man who'd given up on life and the desperate woman who'd somehow found him at the end of the world. Neither of them knew it yet, but the knock on that door had changed everything. The kettle whistled on the stove, a sharp sound that cut through the woman's labored breathing. Elias moved mechanically, gathering what supplies he could think of, clean rags from the trunk, his sharpest hunting knife, the bottle of whiskey he kept for emergencies. His hands trembled as he laid everything out on the table. What did he know about bringing life into the world? His experience ran to pulling calves and foaling mares, not delivering human babies. "Water?" the woman gasped from the bed. "Please, water." He filled a tin cup. helped her sit up enough to drink. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 25, with delicate features beneath the exhaustion and pain. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her lips were cracked from the cold. "What's your name?" he asked, needing something to call her besides the woman. "Clara," she managed between sips. "Clara Bennett, and you?" "Elias Ward." He waited for recognition, for fear, but her eyes remained focused on his face, with nothing but desperate trust. Another contraction seized her, and she doubled over with a cry. The cup fell from her hands, water spreading across the wooden floor. Elias caught her shoulders, held her steady until the pain passed. "How long have you been having pains?" he asked when she could breathe again. Since yesterday morning, but they weren't so bad then. I thought I could make it to Oregon City." She laughed bitterly. "Fool woman, traveling alone in winter." "Where's your husband?" The ring on her finger caught the firelight. Her face closed off, jaw tightening. "Dead. Cholera took him 3 months back, along with half of Carson Valley." She pressed a hand to her belly. "This little one's all I have left of him." Elias absorbed this information, filed it away. A widow, alone and pregnant, trying to reach Oregon in the dead of winter. It spoke of desperation, of having nowhere else to turn. "I need to get out of these wet clothes," Clara said, struggling with the buttons of her dress. "The baby, I can feel it coming." Heat flooded Elias's face. He turned his back quickly, burying himself with stoking the fire. There's a nightshirt in the trunk. Was my mother's. Should fit well enough." He heard rustling behind him, the wet slap of sodden fabric hitting the floor. His ears burned, and he kept his eyes fixed firmly on the flames. This was precisely the sort of situation he'd spent 5 years avoiding, the awkward intimacy of being needed by another person. "You can turn around now," Clara said softly. She was propped against the pillows, wearing the old flannel nightshirt. It was too big for her, making her look younger and more vulnerable. Her hair had begun to dry in the warmth, curling around her face in dark tendrils. "I'm sorry," she said. "Sorry to bring this trouble to your door. I saw the smoke from your chimney and hoped." Another contraction cut off her words. Elias moved without thinking, taking her hand as she rode out the pain. Her fingers crushed his, surprisingly strong for such a small woman. When it passed, she lay back panting. "No need for apologies," he said gruffly. "Storm would have killed you otherwise." "Why do you live up here alone?" she asked, studying his face. Her gaze lingered on his scars without flinching. "You're not that old. Must be a story there." He pulled his hand back, busied himself with checking the water. "Everyone's got stories. Mine's simple enough." Clara continued, as if he'd encouraged her. "Married my Thomas when I was 17. He had dreams of starting a farm out west, somewhere with good soil and plenty of water. We saved for 3 years, sold everything we had." Her voice grew distant. "Made it as far as Carson Valley before the sickness came. I stayed to nurse him, but there was nothing anyone could do. Why didn't you go back east?" She gave him a look that said he ought to know better. "Go back to what?" "Thomas's family never approved of me, said I was too low-born for their precious son. My own folks died when I was 15. Besides," she touched her belly, "I wanted this child born in Oregon, like Thomas dreamed, wanted something of his dreams to come true." Another pain hit her, longer and stronger than before. This time, she couldn't muffle her cry. Elias wet a cloth with cool water, wiped her forehead. Her skin was burning up. "I need to check," he said awkwardly. "To see how close the baby is. I've delivered calves and foals, so I know, somewhat, what to look for." Clara nodded, past the point of modesty. "Do what you need to do." With clumsy, careful hands, Elias did his best to assess the situation. What he found made his stomach tighten. The baby was coming, no doubt about that, but something felt wrong, the position maybe, or the angle. He'd seen similar problems with livestock, knew how quickly things could go bad. "Clara," he said carefully, The baby seems to be turned some. Not coming quite right. Fear flashed in her eyes. Can you fix it? I can try. But it'll hurt something fierce. She gripped the bed frame, knuckles white. Do it, whatever it takes. Save my baby. Over the next hour, Elias worked with hands that gradually steadied as training took over. He'd helped old Samuel Brooks with difficult calvings enough times to know the basics. Gentle pressure, patience, working with the body's natural rhythms rather than against them. Clara bore the pain with a courage that humbled him, crying out only when she couldn't hold it back. The storm howled around the cabin like a living thing, snow piling against the windows until they were white blanks. They were cut off completely now. Might as well have been the only two people left in the world. The fire crackled and Clara's breathing filled the space between them, creating a strange intimacy. Talk to me, Clara gasped during a brief respite. Tell me about yourself. Give me something else to think about besides the pain. Elias hesitated. He'd spent 5 years not talking about himself to anyone, but her eyes were pleading, and he found himself speaking. Worked the Copper Creek mine since I was 16, he said. Good money, steady work. Was saving up to buy a piece of land, maybe start a ranch. He paused, the memory still painful. Cave-in happened on a Tuesday morning. No warning, just a rumble, and then the world fell down. Clara reached for his hand again, squeezed gently. 12 of us trapped down there. Dark as pitch, air getting thinner by the hour. We dug with our bare hands, broken tools, anything we could find. 3 days it took them to reach us. 3 days of... He stopped, unable to describe the horror of it. The dying men, the prayers and curses, the moment when he'd thought his own light was going out. But you survived, Clara said softly. If you can call it that. He touched his ruined face without thinking. Rock took half my face with it. Woman I was courting took one look and couldn't hide her disgust. Can't blame her, really. Nobody wants to wake up to this every morning. So you ran away. The accusation in her tone surprised him. I came here for peace. You came here to hide. Clara corrected. Same as I'm running to Oregon. Difference is, I'm running toward something. You're just running. Before he could respond, another contraction hit her, the strongest yet. She screamed this time, a raw sound that raised the hair on his neck. When he checked again, he could see the baby's head. Almost there, he told her. You're doing fine. Clara, just a little more. She laughed wildly. Fine, I feel like I'm being torn in half. You're the strongest woman I've ever met, he said, and meant it. Now, when the next pain comes, you push hard as you can. The final stage came quickly. Clara fought like a wildcat, pouring every ounce of strength into bringing her child into the world. Elias guided and encouraged, marveling at the fierce determination in her eyes. This slip of a woman had traveled alone through winter storms, faced down death and loss, all for the tiny life fighting to be born. Lightning flashed outside, followed by the odd rumble of thunder in a snowstorm, and in that moment, as if the heavens had marked it, the baby slipped free into Elias's waiting hands. It's a boy, he breathed, staring down at the tiny, perfect form. Clara, you have a son. The baby's first cry filled the cabin, high and indignant and absolutely beautiful. Elias cleaned him quickly, wrapped him in the softest blanket he could find, and placed him in his mother's arms. Clara looked down at her child with such wonder that Elias had to turn away. The naked love on her face was too private, too pure for his scarred eyes. He busied himself with cleaning up, giving them their moment. He's perfect, Clara whispered. Look at him. Elias, look what we did. We... The word stopped him cold, but when he turned back, Clara was holding the baby out to him. You saved us both, she said. You should hold him. Elias's hands shook as he took the infant. The weight of that tiny life in his arms was terrifying and wonderful. The baby's eyes opened, dark blue and utterly trusting. What will you call him? Elias asked, his voice rough. Clara smiled tiredly. Samuel, after my father, Samuel Thomas Bennett. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the cabin, Warmed by fire and filled with new life, a different kind of story was beginning. The first hours after birth passed in a blur of necessary tasks. Elias heated water for Clara to clean herself, found more blankets to keep her and the baby warm, and made a simple broth from the venison he had stored. His movements were careful, almost reverent, as if too much noise might shatter this fragile new reality that had entered his solitary world. Clara dozed fitfully, the baby nestled against her breast. Even in sleep, her arms curved protectively around him. Elias found himself watching them from his chair by the fire, unable to look away. When had he last seen such peace, such complete trust? The baby's tiny fingers curled and uncurled, his rosebud mouth making small sucking motions, even in dreams. Near dawn, Clara stirred. Her eyes found Elias immediately, as if checking he was still there. "You haven't slept," she observed. "Someone needed to keep watch, make sure the fire didn't die." She studied him with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "When's the last time you had someone to watch over?" "Elias Ward." He shifted uncomfortably. "Animals need tending. Same principle." "Not the same at all." She adjusted the baby gently. "Thank you. For everything. I know we've brought chaos to your ordered life. Storm brought you. I just opened the door. You could have kept it barred." He had no answer for that. Outside, the blizzard had settled into a steady snowfall. By the gray light filtering through the windows, he could see they'd gotten at least 3 feet overnight. The pass would be completely blocked now. "We'll be a burden on you," Clara said quietly. "I have some money saved. I can pay—" "No." The word came out harsher than he intended. "No payment. You'll stay until the weather clears and you're strong enough to travel. That's all." Clara opened her mouth to argue, but the baby chose that moment to wake with a hungry cry. She fumbled with the nightshirt, trying to figure out how to nurse him. Elias turned away quickly, busying himself with adding wood to the fire. "He won't latch on," Clara said after a few minutes, frustration creeping into her voice. I thought it would come naturally." Elias remembered watching the ranch women with their babies. How easy they'd made it look. But Clara had no mother, no sisters, no one to teach her these things. "Try holding him different," he suggested, still keeping his back turned. "Saw a woman once say the baby needs to face full on, not twisted to the side." After some rustling and soft murmurs, Clara gave a small cry of triumph. "Yes, oh, he's strong. Look how hungry he is." When Elias finally turned back, Clara had the blanket draped modestly while the baby nursed. Her face glowed with a mixture of relief and wonder. "Tell me about the mine," she said suddenly. "Not the collapse. Before that, what was it like?" Elias blinked at the unexpected question. "Dark, hot, hard work. But you said you worked there from 16. You must have had friends. Stories." He found himself telling her about Big Jim McCarthy, who could sing Irish ballads that made grown men cry, about the Paulson brothers who competed in everything from drilling speed to whiskey consumption, about young Tommy Chen, barely 14, who everyone looked after because he reminded them of their own sons or brothers. "Tommy was in the collapse," Clara said. It wasn't a question. "Died on the second day. Internal bleeding. We figured, went peaceful, at least. Just went to sleep and didn't wake up." "And the others?" "Big Jim made it out. Lost his leg, though, lives with his daughter in Sacramento now. The Paulsons," he shook his head, "found them still holding their picks, like they'd die working." Clara reached out, her fingers brushing his scarred cheek before he could pull away. "You carry them with you. All of them. That's why you can't bear to be around people. You're already carrying too many." He jerked back from her touch. "You don't know anything about it." "I know about loss," she said simply. "I know about survivor's guilt. You think I don't wonder why the cholera took my strong, healthy husband but spared me? Why this baby gets to live when his father doesn't?" Tears slipped down her cheeks. "But hiding from life doesn't honor the dead. Elias, it just adds another ghost to the collection." The baby finished nursing and Clara lifted him to her shoulder, patting his back with instinctive gentleness. Such a small thing. A baby's burp. but it filled the cabin with life in a way Elias had forgotten existed. "What were your dreams?" Clara asked. "Before the mine, you said you were saving for land." "Cattle ranch?" He admitted. "Nothing big. Maybe 100 head to start. Good grazing land by a steady stream. Build the herd slow and steady." He gave a bitter laugh. "Young man's foolishness." "Why foolish? You're still young, still strong. Look at me, Clara. Who'd do business with a man who looks like a monster? Who'd work for me? And what woman would—" He stopped, heat flooding his face. "Would what? Share your life? Bear your children? Love you?" Clara's voice was fierce. "The woman who turned away from you was a fool." She saw only the surface damage. Not the man who survived 3 days of hell and still had the strength to crawl out. Not the man who opened his door to a stranger in a storm. Who brought my baby safely into the world with hands gentle as any doctor's. You don't understand. I understand that you've let one shallow woman and your own fear define your worth. That scar isn't what makes you hide. Elias, your heart is what's truly damaged, and that's something only you can fix. Before he could respond, a new sound cut through their conversation. Horses, multiple horses, struggling through the snow. Elias was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. "Stay quiet," he ordered, moving to the window. 3 riders were forcing their way up the trail, their horses chest-deep in snow, even from a distance. Elias could see they were hard men, the kind the war had made and peacetime couldn't tame. They wore long coats and had rifles across their saddles. "Oh, God," Clara breathed behind him. "No, not now." He turned to find her white-faced, clutching the baby tight. "You know them?" "The one in front, Jonas Creed. She swallowed hard. "He claims my husband owed him money. Showed up at the funeral demanding payment. When I couldn't pay, he said he'd take it in trade." Elias's jaw tightened. He'd known men like Creed, who preyed on the weak and defenseless. "How much?" $500, but Thomas never gambled, never borrowed. I think Creed forged something, or—" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. He's been following me since Carson Valley." The riders were closer now. Would reach the cabin in minutes. Elias checked his rifle, then the pistol at his hip. 3 against 1 wasn't good odds, especially if they were seasoned fighters. "Is there a root cellar?" Clara asked urgently. "Somewhere I can hide with the baby." "No time. Get in the bed. Pull the covers high. You're sick with fever, too weak to talk. Keep the baby quiet if you can." She nodded, scrambling to obey. By the time the heavy knock came at the door, she was huddled under blankets, the baby hidden beneath. Elias opened the door with his rifle prominent but not quite aimed. "Gentlemen, hell of a storm to be riding in." Jonas Creed was a big man, with pale eyes that missed nothing and a scar that ran from ear to chin. His companions were smaller but no less dangerous, one young and twitchy, the other older with the flat stare of a killer. "Looking for someone," Creed said without preamble. "Woman traveling alone, dark hair, pregnant. You seen her?" "I seen a lot of things," Elias replied evenly. "None of them your business?" Creed's eyes narrowed, taking in Elias's scar. "Now that's unfriendly. We've come a long way in harsh weather. Least you could do is invite us in. Share some of that coffee I smell. I live alone for a reason, not much for company." "That's so?" Creed looked past him into the cabin. "Funny thing, though, tracks led up this way before the snow covered them. Woman's tracks. Looked like—" From the bed came a low moan. All 3 men's attention snapped to the sound. Creed smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "Well now, seems you got yourself some company after all." Elias stepped back reluctantly, knowing that forcing the issue now would only escalate things. The 3 men filed in, bringing cold air and menace with them. Their eyes swept the cabin, noting exits, weapons, obstacles. Clara moaned again, turning restlessly under the covers. She'd pulled her hair forward to hide her face, and in the dim light, she could have been anyone. "My woman," Elias said shortly. "Took sick with the fever 2 days back." "Your woman?" Creed moved closer to the bed. "Didn't know Scarface here had himself a woman. Boys." The younger man snickered. Must be blind or desperate. Elias's finger tightened on the rifle trigger, but he held steady. She needs rest. State your business and move on. But Creed was already reaching for the blankets. Just want to make sure. See, the woman we're tracking owes me considerable money. Her husband's debt. You understand? Man's debts don't die with him. His hand closed on the blanket edge. In that moment, Clara turned her face toward them, and Elias saw she'd done something to change her appearance, bitten her lips until they swelled, maybe, or held her breath until her face flushed an unhealthy red. She looked genuinely ill, nothing like the woman Creed was hunting. "Please," she whispered in a voice hoarse and weak. "The baby." Creed froze. "Baby?" As if on cue, a thin cry came from beneath the blankets. Clara fumbled weakly, bringing out the infant. Samuel's face was red and pinched with hunger or distress. "Born yesterday," Elias said, moving closer. "Touch either of them and I'll kill you where you stand." The truth in his voice must have been clear, because Creed stepped back, but his eyes remained suspicious. "Yesterday, you say? In this storm?" "Babies come when they come," Clara rasped. "Please, so tired." The older gunman spoke for the first time. "Creed, this ain't her. Woman we're after was traveling alone, still pregnant. This one's got a man and a newborn." But Creed wasn't satisfied. His pale eyes moved between Clara and Elias, calculating. "Convenient, isn't it? We track our quarry this direction, and suddenly you've got a sick woman with a brand new baby. You calling me a liar?" Elias let the rifle barrel drift toward Creed, not quite pointing, but close enough. The tension in the cabin stretched tight as wire. The baby whimpered, and Clara soothed him with shaking hands. The fire crackled. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Finally, Creed laughed. "No offense meant. Friend, just thorough. Can't be too careful with $500 on the line." He tipped his hat mockingly to Clara. "Ma'am, hope you feel better soon." They filed out. But Elias knew it wasn't over. Men like Creed didn't give up easy, especially not with money involved. He barred the door and moved to the window, watching as they mounted their horses. They didn't leave. Instead, they made camp just within sight of the cabin, building a fire against the snow, watching, waiting. "They know," Clara said quietly from the bed. "Maybe, but they can't prove anything. And they won't try anything in daylight. What about tonight?" Elias checked his rifle again. Then the boxes of ammunition. "Tonight, we'll be ready." The baby fussed, and Clara put him to breast again. The simple domesticity of it, a mother nursing her child, stood in stark contrast to the danger lurking outside. Elias felt something fierce rise in his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced in years. Protective instinct, the need to defend what was his, except they weren't his. In a day or two, Clara would be strong enough to travel. She'd take her baby and continue to Oregon, leaving him to his solitude. This was just a moment stolen from time, a brief interruption in his self-imposed exile. But for now, in this moment, with danger at the door and new life in his bed, Elias Ward remembered what it felt like to have something worth fighting for. Darkness fell early in the mountains, creeping across the snow like spilled ink. Elias had spent the afternoon preparing, checking every window, reinforcing the door, loading extra ammunition within easy reach. Clara watched him work, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, unaware of the danger circling them like wolves. Through the frosted window, they could see the outlaws' campfire flickering in the distance. 3 shadows moved around it, passing a bottle between them, waiting for full dark. Waiting for their chance. "They'll come tonight," Elias said, pulling the heavy shutters closed. Clara nodded, her face calm despite the fear he could see in her eyes. "What do you want me to do?" "When it starts, take the baby and get behind the wood box in the corner. It's the safest spot, good thick logs on 3 sides. Don't come out no matter what you hear." "Elias, promise me." His voice was harder than he intended. "Whatever happens, you protect that child." She met his gaze steadily. We're not your burden to carry. This is my trouble, not yours. You could still tell them the truth. Let them take me. The suggestion hit him like a physical blow. That what you think of me? That I'd hand over a woman and baby to men like that? I think you're a good man who's been hurt enough. I won't add to your scars. He turned away, busying himself with checking the rifle's action. Too late for that kind of thinking. They've seen you here, seen me claim you as mine. Even if I gave you up now, they'd probably kill me just for the insult. It was true, and they both knew it. Men like Creed didn't forgive being lied to, didn't forget faces. The moment Elias had stood between them and Clara, he'd painted a target on himself. Why? Clara asked softly. Why risk this for strangers? Elias was quiet for a long moment, listening to the wind and the distant sound of rough laughter from the camp. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. My mother used to tell me stories when I was young, about knights and honor and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Foolish stories for a foolish boy. But she believed them, lived by them, right up until the consumption took her. He touched his scarred face. I haven't been much of a man these past 5 years, hidden away like a coward, feeling sorry for myself. Maybe this is a chance to be the man she raised me to be. One last time. Clara shifted the baby to one arm and reached out with her free hand, catching his sleeve. Not the last time. You're going to survive this, Elias Ward. We all are. Before he could respond, the baby stirred and began to fuss. Clara tried to soothe him, but his cries grew louder, piercing in the small cabin. He's hungry again, she said apologetically. Feed him then. Could be the last quiet moment we get. She settled in the rocking chair by the fire, adjusting her clothing discreetly. Elias kept his eyes on the windows, giving her privacy, but he could hear the baby's hungry sounds, then the contented silence as he latched on. Such ordinary sounds in an extraordinary moment. Tell me about Oregon, he said, needing to fill the waiting with something besides fear. What's waiting for you there? My husband's cousin has a farm in the Willamette Valley. She wrote that I'd be welcome, that there's always work for willing hands. Clara's voice grew wistful. Thomas used to read me her letters, paint pictures with words about the green valleys and clear rivers. Land so fertile you could throw seeds on the ground and watch them grow. Sounds like paradise. Sounds like hope, she corrected. A place to start over. Raise Samuel right. Teach him to read and write. Maybe send him to school. She paused. What would paradise look like to you? Elias. He considered the question. For so long, his only dream had been solitude. Escape from the stares and whispers. But now, with danger prowling outside and life breathing inside his cabin, that dream felt hollow as a dried gourd. A place where the past doesn't matter, he said finally. Where a man's worth is measured by his actions, not his appearance. That could be anywhere, even here. Not here. This cabin's a tomb, not a home. I see that now. The baby finished nursing and Clara patted his back gently. Outside, the laughter had stopped. The sudden silence was more ominous than any noise. They're coming, Elias said. He positioned himself where he could cover both the door and the single window. Clara hurried to the corner with Samuel, tucking them both behind the heavy wood box. The baby whimpered at the sudden movement. Sing to him, Elias suggested. Quiet-like. Keep him calm. Clara's voice rose in a soft lullaby, barely audible above the crackling fire. It was an old song, one his own mother had sung. The familiar melody steadied his nerves as he waited. The first sign was a shadow passing by the shuttered window. Then another. They were circling, looking for weaknesses. Elias tracked their movement by sound, the crunch of boots in snow, the occasional low murmur of voices. Then came the knock, not the desperate pounding of Clara's arrival, but 3 measured raps. Open up, friend, Creed's voice called. We need to talk. Elias said nothing, rifle ready. Come now. Don't be unsociable. We know you're awake. Can see the smoke from your chimney. Hear that pretty little lullaby. Just want to have a civilized conversation." Still, Elias waited. Let them make the first move. Let them show their hand. "Here's the thing," Creed continued, his tone conversational. "That woman in there, she's got something belongs to me. Now maybe you didn't know that when you took her in. Maybe you're just a good Samaritan, got caught up in something. I can respect that. So here's my offer. Send her out, and we ride away. No harm to you. No burning your cabin down around your ears." "Fair?" From the corner came a small gasp. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes wide with terror above the baby's head. "Counteroffer," Elias called back. "You ride away now, and I don't put a bullet through the door where you're standing." Creed laughed. "Big talk from one man. We got you 3-1. Friend. Mountain man with a rifle and home ground advantage. I like my odds." There was a pause. Then Creed's voice came again. Harder now. "Last chance. Send out the woman. Come and take her." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Then glass shattered as the window exploded inward. Elias was already moving, firing at the muzzle flash he'd seen. A cry from outside told him he'd hit his mark. The door shuddered under a heavy impact. They had a ram of some sort, probably a log from the woodpile. Another blow and the hinges groaned. Elias fired through the door at chest height, heard another yell, but the battering continued. They'd learned their lesson. Were standing to the side now. From the corner, Clara's lullaby continued, tremulous but unbroken. The baby stayed quiet, as if sensing the danger. Another window shattered, this one in the back wall. Elias spun, fired at the figure trying to climb through. The man fell back with a curse, but the distraction cost him. The door gave way with a splintering crash, and Jonas Creed burst through. Elias swung the rifle around, but Creed was faster. Knocking it aside, the two men grappled, crashing into furniture. Creed was bigger, stronger, but Elias fought with desperate fury. They rolled across the floor, fists and elbows flying. Creed's hands found Elias's throat, squeezing. Should have taken the deal. Creed snarled. Stars exploded in Elias's vision. His hand scrabbled for something. Anything. Found the poker by the fireplace, swung it with all his remaining strength. Creed howled. Grip loosening. Elias hit him again, and the outlaw collapsed. But there was no time to rest. The other two were coming. One through the door, one through the window. Elias grabbed his pistol, fired at the nearest man. The shot went wide, but it made them duck for cover. "Give it up," one of them shouted. "Jonas is down. No point dying for his grudge." Elias backed toward the corner where Clara hid, reloading as he moved. His throat ached where Creed had choked him, and blood ran from a cut above his eye. But he planted himself between the outlaws and the woodbox, pistol steady. "Walk away," he rasped. "Take your boss and go." The two men looked at each other, then at Creed's motionless form. The older one, the one with killer's eyes, shrugged. "Wasn't my money anyway," he said. "Come on, kid. Help me with Jonas." They dragged Creed out, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Elias kept the gun on them until they'd loaded him on a horse and started back down the mountain. Only when they disappeared into the darkness did he lower the weapon. His legs gave out then, and he sank to the floor. The cabin was a wreck. Furniture overturned, windows broken, cold air pouring in, but they were alive. Clara emerged from behind the woodbox. The baby clutched tight to her chest. Her face was pale, but determined. "You're hurt," she said, kneeling beside him. "I'll live." He touched his throat gingerly. "Check the baby. Is he?" "He's fine. Slept through most of it, believe it or not." She set Samuel carefully in the bed, then returned with water and clean cloths. "Let me see." Her hands were gentle as she cleaned the cut on his face, wiped away the blood. This close. He could smell her milk and soap and something uniquely feminine. It had been so long since anyone had touched him with care. "You saved us," she said softly. "Risked everything for strangers. Not strangers anymore." Their eyes met and held. Something passed between them, electric as lightning and twice as dangerous. Clara's hand stilled on his face, fingertips barely grazing the edge of his scar. "Elias," he pulled back, breaking the moment. "We need to block those windows. They might come back." It wasn't likely. Creed had looked bad. Might not even survive the ride down the mountain. But Elias needed distance, needed to remember that this was temporary. In a few days, Clara would leave, and he'd be alone again. That was how it had to be. They worked together in silence, using blankets and boards to cover the broken windows. The cabin grew warmer as they sealed out the wind. Though it would never be quite the same, violence had entered this space, left its mark. When they finished, Clara made coffee while Elias kept watch. The baby woke hungry, and she fed him by the fire while Elias paced, unable to settle. "Stop," she said finally. "You're making me nervous. Sit down." He sat reluctantly in the chair across from her. "Sorry, just thinking." "About what?" "About how empty this place would feel when she left, about the way she'd looked at him, like his scars didn't matter, about impossible things. You can't stay here," he said instead. "If Creed lives, he'll want revenge. Even if he doesn't, his men might come back." "I know." She adjusted the baby, not meeting his eyes. "I'll leave as soon as the storm breaks." "That's not what I meant." The words came out before he could stop them. "I'll take you to Oregon. Make sure you get there safe." Clara's head snapped up. "What? You need protection." "I need—" He stopped, started again. "I've been hiding long enough. Maybe it's time I rejoined the living." "Elias, you don't have to—" "I want to." The truth of it surprised him. "For the first time in 5 years, I want to see what's beyond these walls." Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. "Are you sure?" He thought of the empty years behind him, the empty years ahead if nothing changed. Thought of the way she'd sung to her baby while death prowled outside, brave as any warrior. "I'm sure." The baby finished nursing and Clara lifted him to her shoulder. Such a small thing. New life, but it changed everything. Redirected the course of rivers, moved mountains. "Then we'll go together," Clara said, "when the weather clears." Together. The word hung between them like a promise, fragile as spun glass but shining with possibility. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the battered cabin, something new was taking root. Not love, not yet, that would come later, slow and steady as spring growth, but hope. For the first time in 5 years, Elias Ward had hope. The storm broke 3 days later, leaving the world crystalline and new. Elias stood on the porch, breathing in the sharp mountain air, watching the sun turn the snow to diamonds. Behind him, he could hear Clara moving about the cabin, singing softly to Samuel as she worked. The domestic sounds should have grated against his solitary nature, but instead they soothed something raw inside him. They'd spent those 3 days in strange intimacy, 2 people learning to navigate around each other in close quarters. Clara insisted on helping with chores despite his protests that she should rest. She mended the torn curtains, organized his chaotic pantry, and somehow made the cabin feel less like a cave and more like a home. "The pass should be clear enough by tomorrow," Elias said, coming back inside. "We could start for Oregon if you're strong enough." Clara looked up from where she was folding the clothes she'd washed. "I'm ready. But Elias, are you certain this is what you want, leaving everything you've built here?" He gazed around the cabin, at the sturdy walls he'd raised, the furniture he'd crafted, the life he'd carved out of isolation. "It's just wood and stone. Nothing here I can't build again somewhere else." "That's not what I meant." He knew what she meant. Was he ready to rejoin the world? To face the stares and whispers again? To risk the kind of pain that had driven him here in the first place? "If I stay here, I'll die here," he said simply. "Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually, die alone with nothing to show for my years but a pile of pelts and empty coffee cups. That's not living. Clara, that's just existing." She set down the shirt she was folding and crossed to him. "You're one of the bravest men I've ever known." He laughed bitterly. "Brave? I've been hiding for 5 years. You survived. That takes its own kind of courage. And when we needed you, You didn't hesitate. You stood between us and danger without a thought for yourself. Anyone would have. No. Her voice was firm. They wouldn't have. Most men would have barred the door, pretended they heard nothing, or they would have handed me over to save themselves. You did neither. Samuel began to cry from his makeshift cradle, a drawer lined with blankets. Clara went to him, lifting him with practiced ease. In just a few days, she'd grown confident in her mothering, as if the baby had awakened instincts long dormant. He's growing, she said, smiling down at him. Already his face is filling out. Elias moved closer, still fascinated by the tiny person. Samuel's eyes were open, focusing with increasing clarity on the world around him. When Elias leaned over him, the baby's gaze locked onto his scarred face without fear or revulsion, just innocent curiosity. He doesn't know to be afraid, Elias murmured. Why should he be? You're the man who brought him into the world, his first protector. Clara shifted the baby, offering him to Elias. Here, hold him while I start supper. Elias took Samuel carefully, still amazed by how light he was. The baby gurgled, one tiny fist waving in the air. Such perfect fingers, such trust in those dark eyes. What will you tell him? Elias asked. About his father? Clara paused in her work. The truth, that Thomas Bennett was a good man who loved him before he was even born, who worked hard and dreamed big and would have been a wonderful father. She glanced back. What would you want your children to know about you? The question caught him off guard. I won't have children. Why not? You're young, strong. When we get to Oregon... Clara. His voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. What woman would choose this? Would want to wake up to this face every morning? Have children who might carry these scars in different ways? She turned fully to face him, flour dusting her hands. The right woman would see past the scars to the man beneath, would see your kindness, your strength, your careful hands with her baby, would count herself lucky to wake beside someone who'd fight 3 armed men to protect her. The air between them crackled with tension. Elias looked away first, focusing on the baby in his arms. We should talk about the journey. It's 300 miles to Oregon City. Maybe more. Hard traveling with a baby. Clara accepted the change of subject, though her eyes said the conversation wasn't over. I have some money saved. Enough for supplies and maybe a pack horse. I've got pelts to trade. Should be enough to outfit us proper. He paused. Us. Listen to me. Talking like what? Like they were a family. Like this arrangement was permanent instead of just 2 people traveling in the same direction. He didn't finish the thought. That night, as they prepared for sleep, Clara in the bed with Samuel, Elias in his bedroll by the fire, she spoke into the darkness. Elias, what made you open the door that night? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my mother. Even after 5 years, I could hear her voice clear as day. Elias Ward, she would have said. I didn't raise you to turn away from those in need. You opened that door this instant. She sounds like a wise woman. She worked herself to death trying to keep food on our table after Pa died. Never complained, never let on how hard it was. Just carried on. Is that where you learned it? To carry on? I suppose, though I haven't done such a good job of it lately. Clara's voice was soft in the darkness. You're doing fine now. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Elias went down to the hidden cache where he stored his furs, selecting the best for trade. Clara packed what supplies they had, fashioning a sling from cloth to carry Samuel against her chest. They worked in comfortable synchronization, as if they'd been preparing for journeys together all their lives. There's a trading post at Miller's Fork, Elias said, studying a rough map. 2 days' travel if the weather holds. We can resupply there, get proper gear for the baby. Will people? Clara struggled with the words. Will they stare? Talk? Elias's jaw tightened. Probably, but Jim Sullivan runs the post, and he's fair, doesn't care what a man looks like as long as his money's good. They set out at noon, when the sun had warmed the air enough to make travel bearable. Elias had fashioned a travois to carry their supplies, leaving Clara free to tend the baby. She walked beside him, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his sling. The mountain path was treacherous with snow and ice, but Elias knew every twist and turn. He pointed out landmarks as they went. The lightning-struck pine that marked the halfway point, the frozen creek where he'd once tracked a wounded elk for miles, the sheltered grove where they'd camped that night. "It's beautiful," Clara said, gazing at the peaks stretching endlessly before them. "Terrible and beautiful at once. That's the mountains for you. They'll kill you quick as look at you, but Lord, they make you feel alive while they're doing it." She laughed, the sound bright as bells in the thin air. "Is that why you came here? To feel alive?" "Came here to hide," he corrected. Feeling alive was just an accident. They made good time despite the snow, reaching the grove by sunset. Elias built a shelter from pine boughs and canvas, creating a cozy space protected from the wind. They ate a simple meal of jerky and biscuits, Samuel nursing contentedly afterward. "Tell me about Oregon," Elias said as they sat by the small fire. "What's waiting for you there?" "Hope," Clara said simply. "A chance to build something new. Thomas's cousin Martha has a farm in the valley. She lost her husband last year, has 3 young children. We figured we could help each other, pool our resources, share the work." "Sounds like a good plan." "It was Thomas's plan," she corrected softly. "I'm just trying to see it through." The firelight danced across her face, highlighting the strength beneath the delicate features. She'd walked all day without complaint, tended the baby, helped make camp. This slip of a woman had more grit than men twice her size. "What about you?" she asked. "What will you do in Oregon?" He hadn't thought that far ahead. His decision to leave had been impulsive, driven by something he couldn't quite name. "Find work, I suppose. Logging, maybe, or hunting guide. Something that keeps me outdoors." "You could have that ranch you dreamed about." "That was a young man's dream." "You're still young. 35 isn't old." "Elias, you have years ahead of you." "Do I look like someone who should be making plans for the future?" Clara's eyes flashed. "You look like someone who's survived what would have killed most men. You look like someone who's paid for every good thing that might come his way. So yes, you should absolutely be making plans." Before he could respond, Samuel woke crying. Clara tended to him while Elias banked the fire for the night. They settled into their bedrolls, close enough for warmth but carefully separate, in the darkness, with stars brilliant through the pine branches. Clara spoke again. "Elias, thank you for everything." "No need for thanks. There's every need. You've given us a chance at a future. That's no small thing." He lay quiet, thinking about futures and chances and the strange turns life could take. A week ago, he'd been resigned to dying alone on his mountain. Now he was traveling toward Oregon with a woman and baby, acting as protector and guide. It should have felt wrong, this disruption of his careful solitude. Instead, it felt like something clicking into place, like a bone finally set proper after years of healing crooked. "Clara," he said softly, not sure if she was still awake. "Yes?" "I'm glad you knocked on my door." Her hand found his in the darkness, squeezed gently, then withdrew. "So am I. Elias Ward. So am I." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the trading post, curious eyes, the long road to Oregon. But tonight, under the vast Montana sky, 3 souls who'd found each other in the storm, rested together, no longer quite so alone in the world. The cabin door hung broken on its hinges, a gap-toothed mouth gaping at the wilderness. Snow had blown in during the night, dusting the overturned furniture with white. Clara stood in the doorway, Samuel quiet in her arms, surveying the destruction left by Jonas Creed and his men. "It's ruined," she said softly. Elias moved past her, righting a chair, picking up scattered belongings. "Nothing that can't be fixed. Wood and nails, that's all." "That's not what I meant." She entered slowly, stepping over broken glass. "This was your sanctuary, your peace. I brought violence to your door." He turned to face her, his scarred features set with determination. "No, Creed brought violence. You brought life." He gestured to the baby. First time these walls heard a baby's cry. First time that rocking chair got used for its proper purpose. You changed this place. Clara changed it for the better. They worked together to salvage what they could. The windows would need boarding until proper glass could be bought. The door would serve. Barely, if reinforced with additional bars. But as they cleaned and sorted, a different truth emerged. This was no longer home. The sanctuary had been breached, its spell of isolation broken. "Found something," Elias said, pulling a small leather pouch from beneath the overturned bed. "My emergency fund. Been adding to it for years." Clara watched him count the coins and bills. "That's a lot of money. 5 years of fur trading, nothing to spend it on." He hefted the pouch. "More than enough to get us to Oregon in style. Maybe even enough to—" "To what?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Foolish thoughts." That evening, they made the cabin as secure as possible and prepared for one last night. The baby had been fussy all day, perhaps sensing the tension in the air. Clara walked him around the small space, humming softly, while Elias prepared a simple meal. "He knows something's changed." Clara said, "Babies feel more than we think." "Smart boy. Knows when safety's been compromised." Clara stopped walking, studying him. "Is that why you're so eager to leave? Because the safety's gone?" "Part of it." He ladled stew into bowls, not meeting her eyes. "Other part is, I remembered something these past days. Remembered what it's like to be useful, to matter to someone." "You matter," Clara said firmly. "More than you know." They ate in companionable silence, the baby finally settling into sleep. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, but the sound didn't seem threatening now. Just another part of the wilderness symphony they'd soon leave behind. "Elias," Clara said suddenly, "what if Creed isn't done? What if he comes to Oregon? Then I'll be there to stop him." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "Made my choice when I stood between you and them. No going back now. I don't want you obligated to—" "Obligations got nothing to do with it." He set down his spoon, looked at her directly. "I spent 5 years feeling sorry for myself. 5 years wasted on bitterness and isolation. Then you showed up and reminded me what it's like to protect something worth protecting." Clara's eyes shimmered. "We're not your responsibility." "No," he agreed. "You're my choice." Later, as the fire burned low, Clara suddenly spoke from the bed where she lay with Samuel. "Elias, there's something I haven't told you about Thomas's death." He looked up from where he was checking his rifle. "You don't owe me your secrets." "But I need someone to know." She took a shaky breath. "He didn't just die from cholera. He caught it because he gave our food and clean water to a family with children. Their parents were already sick, and Thomas couldn't stand to see the little ones suffer." Elias moved closer, sitting on the floor near the bed. "Sounds like a good man." "He was, but I was so angry at him for it. We had so little, and he gave it away. I begged him not to, told him to think of his own child coming, but he said—" her voice broke. "He said he hoped someone would do the same for us if we needed it. And someone did." Elias said quietly, "When you needed shelter, you found it." Clara reached out, her fingers finding his scarred cheek. This time, he didn't pull away. "Thomas would have liked you, would have seen past the surface to the man beneath. Clara, I see you, Elias Ward, not the scars. You." The moment stretched between them, fragile and frightening and full of possibility. Then Samuel stirred, breaking the spell, and Clara withdrew her hand to soothe him. Dawn came cold and clear. They loaded the travois with their salvaged belongings, Elias taking one last look around the cabin that had been his refuge for 5 years. So many nights staring at these walls, convinced they were all he'd ever need. Now they felt like a prison he was finally escaping. "Ready?" Clara asked, Samuel secure in his sling against her chest. "Ready." They set off down the mountain, leaving the broken doors swinging in the wind. Neither looked back. The trading post at Miller's Fork appeared by mid-afternoon. A collection of rough buildings huddled against the wilderness. Smoke rose from chimneys, and they could hear the ring of a blacksmith's hammer. Civilization, such as it was. "Stay close," Elias murmured as they approached. "Let me do the talking." The main building was warm and crowded, smelling of leather and tobacco and unwashed bodies. Conversations died as they entered. Elias felt the familiar weight of stares, the quick looks followed by averted eyes, but Clara walked beside him with her head high, as if she didn't notice the sudden silence. "Elias Ward," Jim Sullivan called from behind the counter. "Heard you had some trouble up your way. News travels fast. Jonas Creed rode through yesterday, heading east, had a bandage wrapped around his head and a face like thunder. His boys were saying something about a crazy mountain man protecting his woman." Elias set his bundle of furs on the counter. "Need supplies for traveling, and anything you've got for a baby." Jim's eyes went to Clara and Samuel, took in the wedding ring on her finger, the protective way Elias stood beside her. The trader was no fool. He could add 2 and 2, but he was also a businessman. "Got everything you need," Jim said, "including some news you might want to hear. Seems Creed's wanted in 3 territories now. Shot a sheriff down in Nevada. There's bounty hunters on his trail." "Good to know," Elias said evenly. "About those supplies. They conducted business quickly, efficiently." Jim's wife appeared from the back room, cooing over the baby and pressing a bundle of baby clothes into Clara's hands. "Can't sell these anyway, Mrs. Sullivan said gruffly. "Might as well go to someone who needs them." Clara's eyes filled with tears. Thank you so much." As they prepared to leave, loaded down with provisions, Jim pulled Elias aside. "That your woman, Ward?" "She's under my protection." Jim nodded slowly. "Figured as much. You heading to Oregon?" "Maybe." "Well, if you are, there's a wagon train forming up at Fort Bridger. Safety in numbers, especially with a baby along." He paused. "And Ward, good on you. About time you came down off that mountain." They made camp that night by a clear stream, the sound of running water a welcome change from wind and silence. Elias had bought a small tent at the post, giving them better shelter. He'd also bought Clara a new dress to replace her travel-worn one, though she'd protested the expense. "You need to stop spending your money on us," she said as she emerged from the tent in the blue calico. It fit her well, bringing out the color in her eyes. "My money to spend how I choose," he replied, trying not to stare. "Besides, can't have you looking like a ragamuffin when we reach the wagon train. So we're joining them? Safer than traveling alone, and better for Samuel other women around who know about babies." Clara approached where he sat by the fire, settling beside him with an ease that would have been unthinkable a week ago. "Always thinking of us, getting to be a habit." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Elias, what are we to each other?" The question hung in the air like smoke. He'd been dreading it, knowing it would come eventually. What were they? Not strangers anymore, but not anything else either. Not really. "I'm your guide to Oregon," he said finally. "Your protector until you're safe with your cousin. And after that," he poked at the fire, sending up sparks. "After that, you start your new life. Find a good man who can give you and Samuel what you deserve. A proper home. A name without shame attached to it. You have no shame attached to your name." "Look at me. Clara, really look. Is this the face of a man who builds a future, who raises children, who grows old with a woman by his side?" She did look at him, long and steady. Yes. The simple words shook him more than any of Creed's violence had. "You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, but you're not ready to hear it." She stood, brushing off her skirts. "When you are, I'll still be here." That night, as they lay in their separate bedrolls with the baby between them, Elias stared at the stars through the tent opening. Somewhere in the darkness, Creed was running from bounty hunters. Somewhere ahead, Oregon waited with its promises of new beginnings. And here, close enough to touch but still unreachable, lay a woman who looked at his ruined face and saw something worth keeping. The baby whimpered in his sleep, and both adults moved instinctively to comfort him. Their hands met over the small form, and this time neither pulled away. They stayed like that, linked by touch and purpose, while the wilderness night wrapped around them like a blanket. Tomorrow would bring the wagon train, new faces, new challenges, but tonight they were just three souls who'd found each other in a storm, holding on against the darkness. It wasn't love. Not yet. That would come later, slow and steady as sunrise. But it was connection. It was hope. And for Elias Ward, who'd thought both were lost forever, it was enough. The wagon train at Fort Bridger stretched like a small city on wheels. 23 wagons, over 100 souls bound for Oregon's promise. Elias stood at the edge of the gathering, watching families prepare for the journey while Clara spoke with the wagon master about joining the group. "That your woman?" A gruff voice made him turn. A bearded man in worn leather studied him with curious eyes, gaze lingering only briefly on the scars. "She's traveling under my protection," Elias replied carefully. "Name's Josiah Briggs. My family's got the wagon with the yellow canvas." He spat tobacco juice to the side. "Wagon master says you fought off Jonas Creed and his boys. That true?" "There was trouble. We handled it." Josiah grinned. "Man who can handle Creed is welcome on any train I'm riding. We lost folks to bandits last year. Good to have another gun who knows how to use it." Clara returned then, Samuel peaceful in her sling. "We're approved to join. The wagon master says we can share supplies with the Hendricks family. They lost their eldest son to fever and have extra space." Over the following days, they settled into the rhythm of wagon train life. Elias hunted to supplement the group's supplies, his knowledge of game trails proving invaluable. Clara helped with cooking and washing, Samuel charming the other women with his ready smiles. "That baby's growing like a weed," Mrs. Hendricks observed one evening, watching Clara feed him. "Good thing, too. Trails hard on the little ones." They'd been traveling for a week when trouble found them again. Not Creed this time, but nature itself, a river crossing swollen with spring melt. The usual ford was impassable, forcing them to attempt a dangerous upstream crossing. "Need every able hand," the wagon master announced. "Men on the ropes, women and children to stay with the wagons." Elias positioned himself at the lead rope, helping guide the first wagon across. The current was fierce, trying to sweep everything downstream. Shouts and curses filled the air as men fought to keep the wagons stable. They'd gotten half the train across when disaster struck. The Perkins wagon, heavy with farming equipment, tilted in the current. "Misses!" Perkins screamed as the wagon began to tip, her two young children clinging to her skirts. Without thinking, Elias plunged into the torrent. The icy water hit like a punch, trying to drag him under. But he fought forward, reaching the wagon just as it overturned completely. He grabbed the youngest child, a girl of maybe 4, and pushed her toward the bank where other men waited to pull her to safety. The mother was trapped, her skirts tangled in the wagon wheel. Elias dove under, fighting the current and the murky water to free her. His lungs burned, spots dancing in his vision. But he kept working until the fabric tore free. He surfaced with Mrs. Perkins, both gasping for air, and helped her toward shore. Someone had rescued the older child, and the family was reunited on the bank, sobbing with relief and cold. "You saved them." Clara was suddenly there, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "Elias, you saved them all." He was too cold and exhausted to respond, teeth chattering as she led him to their fire. But as warmth slowly returned to his body, he became aware of something else. The way the other travelers looked at him had changed. No longer just curiosity or polite distance, but respect, even admiration. "That was the bravest thing I ever saw," young Tom Hendricks said, offering Elias a cup of hot coffee. "Jumping in like that, no thought for yourself. Anyone would have." "No, sir, they wouldn't. Current like that kills men twice your size, but you didn't hesitate." That night, the Perkins family brought what little they'd saved from their wagon to share. "Ain't much," Mr. Perkins said, his voice thick with emotion. "But what we got is yours. You gave me back my family." As the evening wore on, Elias found himself drawn into the community in a way he hadn't expected. Men asked his advice about hunting. Women thanked him for the fresh meat he provided. Children, who'd initially shied away from his scarred face, began to creep closer, curious and unafraid. "See?" Clara murmured, sitting beside him as the camp settled for the night. "They see what I see. A good man worth knowing." But peace was short-lived. 2 nights later, the watch raised an alarm. Riders approaching from the east, moving fast. Elias grabbed his rifle, joining the men forming a defensive line. The riders stopped just within firelight range, 3 of them, hard-faced and travel-worn, bounty hunters by the look of them. "Looking for Jonas Creed," their leader called out. "Heard he might have passed this way." The wagon master stepped forward. "Haven't seen him. You're welcome to water your horses, but we've got no quarrel with you." The bounty hunter's eyes swept the assembled group, pausing on Elias. "You there, with the scarred face. You're the one had the run-in with Creed up Montana way." Elias stepped into better light. "That's right. He say anything? About where he was headed? Who he was meeting?" He was more interested in taking than talking. The bounty hunter studied him a moment longer, then nodded. "Well, if you see him again, there's $500 on his head. Dead or alive." He touched his hat brim. "Evening to you all." They rode off into the darkness, but the encounter left everyone uneasy. The watches were doubled that night, and Elias found himself walking the perimeter, too restless to sleep. Clara found him there, Samuel sleeping in her arms. "You're worried. Bounty hunters mean Creed's still out there, still dangerous, but running now, with bigger problems than us?" "Maybe." He took Samuel from her, needing the comfort of that small weight. The baby stirred but didn't wake. "I keep thinking about what happens when we reach Oregon. You'll go to your cousin's farm. I'll find work somewhere. This will end." "Does it have to?" He looked at her in the moonlight. Beautiful, strong, braver than she had any right to be. What else can it be? Whatever we choose to make it. She stepped closer. "Elias, I'm not a child. I know what I've lost, what I've survived. I know what I want for my future. The question is, do you?" Before he could answer, she'd risen on her toes and pressed her lips to his, soft, brief, but it shot through him like lightning. She pulled back before he could respond, took Samuel from his arms, and walked back to camp without another word. Elias stood frozen, fingers touching his lips. In 5 years of isolation, he'd convinced himself he was beyond such things, that his scars had burned away any chance at love or desire. But that simple kiss had awakened something he'd buried deep hope for more than mere survival. The next days passed in a blur of travel. The train made good time across the plateau, spirits rising as they neared the final mountain pass before Oregon. Elias and Clara maintained a careful distance, but awareness hummed between them like a taut wire. It was young Tom Hendricks who brought word that changed everything. He came running into camp one evening, face flushed with excitement and fear. "Riders coming," he gasped. "From the west, Mr. Ward. One of them looks like that Jonas Creed." Elias was moving before the boy finished speaking. Clara right behind him. They found the wagon master already organizing defenses. "Could be nothing," the older man said, but his hand rested on his pistol. "Could be they're just passing through." But Elias knew better. Men like Creed didn't forgive, didn't forget. He'd been running from bounty hunters, yes, but he'd also been circling back. Pride wouldn't let him leave a defeat unavenged. "Clara, take Samuel and get in the Hendricks wagon," Elias ordered. "I'm not hiding while you—" "Please." He caught her shoulders, looked into her eyes. "I can't fight him and worry about you both. Please." She searched his face, then nodded. "You come back to us. Elias Ward, you hear me? You come back." The riders appeared as the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky red as blood. 4 of them. Creed had found new men. They stopped just outside rifle range, and Creed's voice carried clearly in the still air. Elias Ward, I've got business with you. Step out and face me like a man. The wagon master started to speak, but Elias was already walking forward. This was his fight, his choice. Behind him, he heard rifles being readied, knew the men of the train would back him if needed. He wasn't alone anymore. He stopped 20 paces from Creed. The outlaw looked worse for wear, a dirty bandage around his head, his left arm hanging stiff, but his eyes burned with the same cold fury. Thought I was done with you. Elias said calmly, Nobody makes a fool of Jonas Creed. Nobody takes what's mine. She was never yours. Neither was the money. Creed smiled. Ugly and promises violence. Doesn't matter now. What matters is you're going to pay. Your woman, your brat. They'll pay too. No. Elias's voice was stone. This is between us. Leave them out of it. Call it then. You and me. Winner walks away. No one else gets hurt. Elias heard movement behind him. The wagon train men spreading out, taking positions. Good people who didn't deserve to bleed for his choices. But also his people now. His community. The family he'd found when he'd stopped running. Agreed. Elias said. They faced each other as the sun died. Two men shaped by violence and loss. By different choices made in hard times. Somewhere in the wagons, a baby cried. Samuel, sensing his mother's fear. The sound steeled Elias's resolve. Draw! Creed snarled. Time slowed. Elias saw Creed's hand move. Saw his own responding. The shots came so close together they sounded as one. Then silence, stretching like eternity. Creed looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. Surprise replacing fury. You son of a... He fell forward, gun dropping from nerveless fingers. His men sat frozen for a moment, then wheeled their horses and fled into the gathering darkness. Elias stood still, gun smoking in his hand. A burning line across his ribs said Creed's bullet had found its mark, but not fatally. He was alive. It was over. Then Clara was there, Samuel in one arm, her free hand checking his wound. You're hurt. I'll live. Yes, she said fiercely. You will. You'll live a long life. Elias Ward, with us. Do you hear me? With us. This time, when she kissed him, he was ready. His arms went around her and the baby both, holding them close while the wagon train erupted in cheers around them. He'd fought thinking only of protecting them, but somewhere between the challenge and the gunfire, he'd realized the truth. They weren't just under his protection. They were his reason to fight, his reason to live, his family. The wound was cleaned and bandaged by skilled hands, the body buried with little ceremony. That night, as the train celebrated their survival, Elias sat by the fire with Clara and Samuel, finally understanding what he'd been too scarred to see. Love wasn't about perfect faces or unmarred souls. It was about choosing each other despite the damage, building something new from the broken pieces. It was about opening a door in a storm and finding your life transformed. Oregon's close now, Clara said softly, Samuel sleeping between them. Yes. What happens when we get there? Elias looked at her, really looked, without fear or shame. We build that ranch, raise Samuel and maybe some brothers and sisters for him, live the life we've earned. Together? Together. She smiled, radiant in the firelight. Then let's go home. Elias, let's go home. Spring came to Oregon like a gentle promise, melting the last of the winter snow and painting the valley in shades of green Elias had forgotten existed. He stood on the rise overlooking their land, 40 acres of good soil near a clear running creek, purchased with the money from his furs and what Clara had saved. The house should go here, Clara said, coming to stand beside him. Samuel, now crawling with determined enthusiasm, played in the grass at their feet, where we can see the sunrise over those hills. 6 months had passed since they'd reached Oregon territory. 6 months of hard work and harder choices, but also 6 months of something Elias had never thought to have again, belonging. They'd stayed initially with Clara's cousin Martha, helping with her farm while searching for their own land. Martha had taken one look at them and declared, "About time Clara found herself a man who can work, and you." She'd pointed at Elias. Don't you dare think those scars matter one whit to anyone worth knowing. The wedding had been simple. A traveling preacher. Martha's family as witnesses. Samuel gurgling happily in Clara's arms as they spoke their vows. Elias had worn his one good shirt. Clara, the blue calico he'd bought her at Miller's Fork, when the preacher pronounced them man and wife. The kiss they shared held all the promises words couldn't capture. A real house, Elias mused now, pulling Clara against his side. Not a cabin, but a proper home, with a parlor for you and a room for Samuel. Rooms, Clara corrected. He'll need brothers and sisters. Heat crept up Elias's neck, but he smiled. These months of marriage had taught him that Clara Bennett, Clara Ward now, was full of surprises. Gentle when he expected strength, fierce when he expected softness. And always looking at him like he'd hung the moon. Best get to building then, he said. The house rose slowly but steadily. Neighbors came to help with the raising. The Johnsons from the next farm over. The Millers from down the creek. Even some families from the wagon train who'd settled nearby. Elias had worried about how they'd receive him. But Clara had been right. Here in Oregon, what mattered was the work of your hands and the content of your character, not the scars on your face. You saved my family at that river crossing. Mrs. Perkins reminded him as she brought lunch for the workers. My children are alive because of you. That's all I need to know about Elias Ward. By summer, the house stood complete. 2 stories of solid timber with real glass windows and a stone chimney. Clara had insisted on a wide porch where they could sit in the evenings, and Elias had added a rocking chair like the one from his mountain cabin. The land responded to their care like it had been waiting for them. The kitchen garden flourished under Clara's hands, while Elias worked to clear pasture for the small herd of cattle they'd bought. It was hard work from dawn to dusk, but good work, honest work. Look at him go, Clara laughed one evening, watching Samuel pull himself up on the porch railing. At 10 months old, he was determined to walk, falling and getting up again with stubborn persistence. He's got your determination, and your courage, Elias replied, scooping up the boy before he could tumble off the porch. Samuel laughed, patting Elias' scarred cheek with chubby fingers. Dada, he said clearly, his first word. Elias froze, eyes burning with sudden moisture. Clara wrapped her arms around them both. That's right, sweetheart, she murmured to Samuel. That's your daddy, the bravest man in Oregon Territory. News came occasionally from the outside world. Jonas Creed's death had closed that chapter. His gang scattered to the winds. The wagon train families had spread throughout the valley, creating a network of friendships forged on the trail. Even word came from Montana, Jim Sullivan writing that Elias's old cabin had been claimed by another hermit, though this one was apparently friendlier with visitors. Do you miss it? Clara asked one night as they lay in their bed, Samuel sleeping soundly in his cradle nearby. The solitude? The mountains? Elias considered the question. Through their window, he could see stars, bright but not as fierce as they'd been at altitude. He could hear the creek running, the cattle lowing softly in the pasture. Different sounds than the mountain wind, but no less peaceful. I miss the simplicity sometimes, he admitted. When my biggest worry was having enough firewood for winter. But Clara, he turned to face her in the darkness. I was dying up there. Slowly, maybe, but dying all the same. Just too stubborn to admit it. And now I'm living, really living. Every day with you and Samuel is a day I didn't think I'd have. How can I miss what I had when this is so much more? She kissed him then, soft and sweet. And he marveled again that this woman had chosen him, had looked past the surface damage to see something worth saving. Fall brought harvest time and news that made Clara place Elias's hand on her still flat belly with a mysterious smile. Samuel's going to have that sister or brother we talked about, she said. The joy that flooded through him was almost frightening in its intensity. Another child, another chance to build the family he'd thought lost forever. He pulled Clara close, pressing his face into her hair to hide the tears that threatened. Are you happy? She asked softly. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. They told Martha first. who immediately began planning all the things the new baby would need. The community embraced the news with enthusiasm. The wards were well liked now, integrated into the fabric of valley life. Elias's hunting skills kept many families supplied with meat, while Clara's gentle nature and wisdom made her sought after for advice and comfort. Winter came mild that year, nothing like the brutal Montana storms. Elias built a cradle for the new baby, while Clara sewed tiny clothes. Samuel took his first real steps on Christmas Eve, toddling from Clara to Elias with arms outstretched and a smile bright as sunrise. "He'll be a good big brother," Clara said, watching Samuel explore with newfound mobility. Protective, like his father. One evening in late winter, as snow dusted the valley in pristine white, Elias sat on the porch despite the cold. The house behind him glowed with warmth. Clara was inside, singing to Samuel as she prepared supper. The cattle were secure in the barn he and the neighbors had raised. The root cellar was full of preserved food for the remaining winter months. 5 years ago, he'd sat alone in a mountain cabin, convinced his life was over. His face bore scars that would never fade, marks of a tragedy that had shaped him but no longer defined him. That man, bitter, isolated, afraid, felt like a stranger now. The door opened and Clara emerged, wrapped in a shawl. "You'll catch your death out here." "Just thinking." She settled beside him, fitting against his side like she belonged there, which she did. "About what?" "About how a knocked door can change everything. How the worst storm of my life brought me the best thing that ever happened to me." "3 things," Clara corrected, patting her growing belly. "Soon to be 4. From inside came Samuel's voice, calling for his parents. They rose together, Elias's arm around Clara's shoulders, and went into their son. The house enfolded them in its warmth, the home they'd built with their own hands, filled with love neither had thought to find again. As spring returned to the valley, bringing with it the birth of Emma Ward, small but fierce like her mother, Elias often found himself on that same porch in the evenings. But now he wasn't alone. Clara would be beside him, the baby in her arms, Samuel playing at their feet. Neighbors might stop by to share news or seek advice. The isolated cabin on the mountain felt like a different lifetime, a different man's story. "You're smiling," Clara observed one such evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. "Am I?" But he knew he was. How could he not? The man who'd thought his life ended in a mine collapse had discovered it was only beginning. The face that had frightened away love had found someone who saw past the scars to the soul beneath. The hermit who'd chosen isolation had built a community, a family, a life worth living. "Daddy, look!" Samuel called, holding up a flower he'd picked for his mother. "I see. Son, beautiful. Just like your mama." Clara laughed, the sound bright as mountain water. "Flatterer, though I'll take it." As night fell over their valley, Elias Ward, husband, father, neighbor, friend, held his family close and marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate knock on a cabin door to this moment of perfect peace, life had taught him its greatest lesson. Sometimes the storms we fear most bring us exactly where we need to be. The scars remained, would always remain, but they were just part of his story now, not the whole of it. And as he kissed his wife and children good night, settling into the life he'd built from the ashes of the old, Elias knew with bone-deep certainty that he was finally, truly home. Thank you for listening to this story. Dear audience, if you're enjoying these tales from the American frontier, please let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to hear from people around the world who share our passion for these powerful stories of love and redemption. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Elias and Clara's journey in the comments below. Your support helps us continue bringing these authentic Western stories to life.